So Fennec says, Cirrus, how are you doing really? Well, let's see here. I'm definitely burnt out. I know that for a fact. That's why I had to take a week off, and I didn't really feel like hopping on today, but there's enough going on that I needed to get something made in regards to this. As far as how I am personally doing, I am functional. That's where I'm at. But I'm also upset. I'm upset that I live in a country where people justify this kind of stuff. But at the same time, I can't be so upset about that because the same thing is happening in China. It's happening in Russia. It's happening in multiple countries across the world that have regimes that are oppressive towards their people. It just happens that the United States is one of those regimes. And at the same time, I'm also kind of upset because there's nothing I can do. Not directly. I can make an offhand statement about how it would be really, really good in Nazi Germany for the members of the citizenry to have brained the members of the Gestapo in order to make sure that they were not able to actually harm other citizens and other minority groups. I can make that statement, but I recognize that it's a statement that's rooted in fantasy. Because ultimately, despite the fact that we could be more powerful, united as a giant group of people, the reality is you and I are atomized. We are separate from one another in a major way. In reality, there are more United States citizens than there are ICE agents. There are more United States citizens than there are military members, if it came to that. But the reality is, we are both so incredibly fractured in our ideologies in the United States, thanks to a rugged individualism that has been beat into us from birth, that any kind of conversation about looking at the United States government and saying enough is enough simply can't happen. It can't manifest in any meaningful way. Not without a lot of change from the bottom up. And that frustrates me. I would like that to not be the case, but I also recognize that were that the case, I would also be advocating for a nightmarish amount of bloodshed, not only from the side of the people that I do not like and do not think should be oppressing American citizens, but also bloodshed from the people who would be engaging in that kind of conflict. People who would be permanently destroying families, not only their own, but of others, in order to do, let's make no bones about it, a civil war. And at that point, I have to ask myself, how frustrated can I truly be that the United States is not willing to engage in a civil war the way that Tim Pool seems to wax lyrical about every goddamn week on Twitter? Subnarch says, don't assume the military is entirely on Trump's side. I didn't assume that. But I also know who they take their standing orders from. So, I am frustrated that it has gotten this bad. That through disinterest in public policy and politics in general, that people have let the society we live in get to the point where there is an active, albeit softer than we would expect, genocide on trans people. And when I say softer than we would expect, I mean where the only way to really point out that there is a trans genocide happening is by going through the actual steps of a genocide one by one and going, do you see how they did this one? Do you see how they did this one? Whereas with something like the Holocaust, it's pretty easy to point and go, yeah, they had camps. It's frustrating that the side that I do not like has learned enough from the past to make that happen in my lifetime. It is frustrating that the side I do not like has learned enough from the past to figure out how to convince United States citizens that it's okay for them to engage in this level of harassment and even destruction of lives themselves. And that likewise, United States citizens don't really have a method that is safe for getting rid of any of this. I'm upset because if we were to engage in articles of impeachment for the President of the United States, which I believe we should, but let's say that everything goes well there. Let's say that the Senate is on our side, and we get our 2/3 majority that we need, our 60 some odd percent that we need in order to actually impeach and remove the President of the United States. We then get J.D. Vance. Now, who is J.D. Vance going to be puppeteered by? The same people Trump is puppeteered by. He's going to be puppeteered by the Heritage Foundation. Now, this is a point, again, me and my editor disagree on, but the fact that the Heritage Foundation has been pulling the strings of multiple Republican officials for years, they wrote the original book that Reagan operated on, changing the figurehead would seemingly do fucking nothing. Sure, it might take J.D. Vance a year to get all of the loyalists in line, but what did we do then, really? We would have slowed things down. I'm frustrated because of Venezuela. I'm frustrated because all of that same logic applies there. We have people on the right who look... Also, Sylvie, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub to Axo. We have people on the right that look at what we did in Venezuela and go, yeah, no, that's perfect. That's what we should do everywhere else. As if we already weren't engaging in those kind of regime changes for years. And realistically, is that regime going to change? Or did we just change out who the president was, but we still kept all of the infrastructure there exactly as we had before? But there are people on the right who will still celebrate that. I am upset that a propaganda machine has been created that is so incredibly saturated and good at what it does that people can be convinced that the evidence of their own eyes is not worth considering. That instead, the words of the state matter more. I'm not well because I live in that world. I live in a world where I have to wonder, is the next year of healthcare for my girlfriend going to dry up? Because the regime, as it exists, decides to continue to throw its sights on trans people. But that's not the entire story. That's not everything. Because it's not all doom and gloom. Those are the parts that make me frustrated. Those are the parts that make me not want to get out of bed and instead just sit down and play video games all day. Because at least that's an environment where I can control things. It's an environment where I can learn experiences that I can consider without them directly impacting me. But the flip side to all this is that the hotter those fires burn, the closer they get to the disenfranchised liberal asses. And even some of the leftists who like to say things like voting doesn't do anything. And yet, can I ask you guys a question? Does anybody here know how much money is spent on political ad campaigns? Does anybody here know how much money is spent trying to lobby that we should redistrict fucking political areas? It's a lot. Do you know why there's so much? Do you know why there's so much interference in electoral politics? It's because they work. That interference exists because voting works. It's also the bare minimum you can do. So I have at least a little bit of a happy thought in regards to all this. This is the other side of the coin, is that the worse things get in reality, the more motivated people get to change that. The more of a thumbhold that Trump tries to put on immigrants, the harder Democrats are going to fight to keep that part of their voting base. The harder Trump puts his hold on trans people, the harder trans allies are going to fight in order to get public policy to help their brothers, sisters, friends, and family. The worse things get, the less people can feel like they should be detached. Because the fact of the matter is, if you don't happen to politics, politics simply happens to you. And I think that there's more people who are coming to terms with that because of the current regime. They are recognizing that, oh, this is what happens when I don't get in there and vote. This is what happens when I don't get the guy who shouldn't have power out of office. This is what happens when I don't do those things. Money is spent to disenfranchise voters because voting is an actual method that we can use to elicit change. And it works. Even if you believe that the Democrat Party is just as bad as the Republican Party, there are ways in which they are, I agree. But even if you believe that, ask yourself, which group does more harm to the American people? And substantiate that claim. If you're on the left, I expect there's going to be forms of, well, the status quo is capitalism, and that status quo is harmful because it still engages in exploitation of labor. Okay, I can accept that argument. If you're on the right, if you're arguing Democrats are bad, I guess you're just going to grab whatever Donald Trump said this last week. That's been my experience when I talk to the right wing. But I would like to know your thoughts in the comment section below as for which side you think is awful and why. But the fact of the matter is, if you willingly choose not to participate in the baseline level, the absolute floor of involvement that you could do, why should I give a shit what your opinion is on the higher levels of involvement? You don't want to just vote even once in a while, even in a fucking primary? You don't want to do that? But you want me to hear about your conversations about revolution and how that's going to change everything when you didn't try plan fucking A? Okay, wild. Anyway, on the flip side of that, you don't want to talk about how voting is super important, but at the same time, we see millions of dollars being spent to try to curtail people from fucking voting or to change their vote. All this happens because it works. Because we currently live in a democracy. Crumbling as it may be, it is still that. And we can reinforce it. There are those who do not want to reinforce democracy and instead want to make it worse, because they think that something better is going to grow out of the ashes. But the fact that there is still one that we can utilize right now is a glimmer of hope. There is a happy set of thoughts there. I may be frustrated in how we've engaged in foreign policy. I may be frustrated in how we've managed to sweep actual steps of genocide under the rug when it comes to American citizens. I may be frustrated because of the ways that in which our administration is currently attacking American citizens and immigrants through unjust means. All that can be frustrating. But each and every one of those things is a building block of frustration that gets people motivated to do something. And the very first thing you should be doing is voting. The second thing you should be doing is influencing who gets the vote in the first place. Voting is the bare minimum you can do. But you can also join the DSA if you've got the time. Join the DSA because they have had actual results in getting people into local politics that are more left-aligned. That's a thing you can do. If you don't have time to join the DSA, you can also go to your local Democratic committee. I've done it. I've not gone recently because I've frankly been too busy with the channel stuff and everything else to take every aspect of my life and do politics in every aspect of my life. But I have done it. It's not hard. Go onto Facebook, see when they're having, or go on to Mobilize, see when they're having a conversation, see when they're having a meeting, and just show the fuck up. You can do that. Usually, you can let people know your opinions. You can let the politicians there know your opinions about how they've comported themselves, the things that you think they should actually be engaging in. You can even write the policy yourself and submit it to them so they can submit it later. You've got a lot of options you can do. You can also lobby. You can also go to your capital, or if you've got the ability to travel to the United States Capitol, and you can lobby both your local and federal Congress. You can do that. That's a thing you can do. And that is a stage above voting. That is directly advocating for your rights to your representatives. Those are things you can do. And there's way more than that. The thing is, I'm just a talking head. I'm a frustrated guy on the internet. That's what I am. But I am hoping that at the very least those things, if not more things, people would be willing to do, and more willing to do them because things have gotten so bad in just one of the 4 years that we have to deal with Trump as president. And I'm only asking y'all to do things that I have personally done. I have gone to my local Democrat meetings. I have gone to protests. I have gone to lobby for my in front of my local Congress. I say in front of, it was directly to each Republican that I could get a hold of. Not to obfuscate the situation. I'm not advocating for pipe dream things. I'm advocating for things that I did because I literally woke up that day and said, oh shit, that's a thing I should probably do. The motivation was not much more complicated than that. And it needn't be. So no, I'm not doing great, but I'm also hopeful. Because the worse things get, the more people get motivated to do things about it. And I'm hoping that people do those things. I've given my list of the bare minimum shits. I've given my list of a handful of the things that I've done. Go out and do more. Please.
Hey, you made it to the end. I want to give an extra thanks to the patrons who allow me to do this full time. I want to thank Aaron Rail, Astral, Britzkrieg, Jemshin, Poundini, Red Joker, Victoria, Jonas, Craig, Tarika, Fireshard, Smiling GM, John, Dren Hadamada, Creeper, Sagitta, you know I'm not saying that last part, Valis of Seraph, Ottoman Angel, Rooster Rachel, and Fire Panda, who are all my $20 and up patrons.